In the quiet corners of human psychology lies a paradox that has fascinated observers of human nature for centuries. There exists within the masculine psyche an archetype that operates in shadows, not the shadows of evil or malevolence, but the shadows of depth, complexity, and authentic power. This is not the performative masculinity that seeks validation through aggression or dominance over others, but rather a more profound form of strength that emerges from the conquest of one's own limitations and weaknesses. The concept of the dark masculine has been misunderstood and misrepresented in popular discourse, often confused with toxic behaviors or manipulative tactics. However, the true dark masculine archetype represents something far more sophisticated and psychologically mature. It embodies the man who has faced his own darkness, acknowledged his shadows, and emerged with a quiet confidence that requires no external validation. This is the man who has learned that the greatest battles are fought not against others, but against the weaker aspects of himself. When we examine the psychological underpinnings of attraction and respect, we find that certain qualities consistently draw both admiration and romantic interest. These qualities are not superficial attributes, but rather deep-seated characteristics that signal psychological strength and emotional stability. The dark masculine archetype encompasses these qualities not through pretense or manipulation, but through genuine development and self-mastery. The foundation of this archetype rests on the principle that authentic strength comes from vulnerability transformed into wisdom. The man who embodies this archetype has not avoided pain, failure, or emotional turmoil. He has walked through these experiences and allowed them to forge him into something stronger. He understands that weakness is not the absence of strength, but the failure to acknowledge and work with one's limitations. By facing his own inadequacies head-on, he develops a form of strength that cannot be shaken by external circumstances or the opinions of others. This psychological transformation creates a particular type of presence that others find compelling. It is not the loud confidence of the insecure man seeking attention, but the quiet assurance of someone who knows himself deeply. Women, being generally more attuned to emotional subtleties and psychological nuances, often find themselves drawn to this authentic strength because it represents safety and stability in a world full of men who are still fighting battles with themselves. The dark masculine does not seek to control others because he has learned to control himself. He does not manipulate situations because he has developed the inner resources to handle whatever outcomes arise. He does not need constant validation because he has built his sense of worth on solid internal foundations rather than shifting external sands. This independence from the need for approval creates a magnetic quality that draws others toward him, not because he is trying to attract them, but because he has become the kind of person worth being attracted to. The psychological literature on mate selection consistently shows that both men and women are drawn to partners who display emotional stability, self-confidence, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. These traits signal genetic fitness and the capacity to be a reliable partner and provider. However, the dark masculine archetype goes beyond mere stability. It represents transformation and growth. It shows that a man has not simply maintained his equilibrium, but has actively worked to improve himself and overcome his limitations. This process of self-improvement and shadow work is not comfortable or easy. It requires a man to confront aspects of himself that he would prefer to ignore or deny. It means acknowledging his fears, insecurities, jealousies, and petty desires without being consumed by them. It means looking at his past mistakes and failures not with self-flagellation but with the clear eyes of someone committed to learning and growing. This honest self-assessment and commitment to improvement creates a depth of character that shallow, superficial masculinity cannot match. The man who embodies the dark masculine archetype understands that his primary relationship is with himself, and that all other relationships flow from this primary relationship. He does not look to romantic partners to complete him or fill voids in his life. Instead, he approaches relationships from a place of wholeness and abundance, offering his strength to enhance his partner's life rather than seeking to extract something he lacks. This fundamental shift in approach, from taking to giving, from needing to offering, transforms the entire dynamic of his interactions with others. In professional settings, this archetype manifests as quiet competence and unshakable focus. The man who has conquered his weak self does not need to prove his worth through office politics or aggressive posturing. He lets his work speak for itself and maintains his integrity regardless of external pressures. This consistency and reliability make him valuable to employers and respected by colleagues. He becomes the person others turn to in crisis situations, because they know he will remain calm and focused when others are reactive and emotional. The development of this archetype requires time, experience, and often considerable pain. It cannot be faked or manufactured through techniques or strategies. It must be earned through the difficult work of honest self-examination and conscious growth. This is why it is relatively rare and why it commands such respect when authentically embodied. Most men either avoid this inner work altogether or begin it but abandon it when the process becomes uncomfortable. The rewards of this development, however, extend far beyond romantic or professional success. The man who has done this work experiences a deep sense of inner peace and self-respect that no external circumstances can shake. He knows who he is and what he stands for. He has tested himself and found that he can be relied upon. This internal confidence creates a positive feedback loop where his improved self-concept leads to better decisions, which lead to better outcomes, which reinforce his positive self-concept. Understanding the dark masculine archetype requires distinguishing it from its shadow counterparts. The manipulative narcissist may appear confident and self-assured, but his confidence is brittle and dependent on maintaining control over others. The toxic alpha male may display dominance and aggression, but these behaviors often mask deep insecurities and fears. The dark masculine, in contrast, is secure enough in himself to be gentle, vulnerable when appropriate, and supportive of others' success. His strength is not diminished by lifting others up because it comes from internal rather than comparative sources. Part 2. The Machiavellian Mind Transformed. The name Machiavelli has become synonymous with cunning manipulation and ruthless pursuit of power, but this popular understanding misses the deeper wisdom contained in his observations about human nature and effective leadership. When we examine Machiavelli's writings beyond the surface level of political strategy, we discover insights into the psychology of strength and the importance of understanding both oneself and others with unflinching clarity. The man who embodies the evolved Machiavellian mind has learned to see reality as it is, not as he wishes it were. This clear-eyed perception of human nature and social dynamics is one of the most attractive qualities a man can possess because it signals wisdom and competence. Women, being generally more socially aware and emotionally intelligent than men, often find themselves drawn to men who demonstrate this kind of social sophistication and psychological insight. However, the dark masculine interpretation of Machiavellian principles differs fundamentally from the popular conception of manipulation and scheming, where the immature masculine seeks to exploit human weaknesses for personal gain. The mature masculine seeks to understand these weaknesses in order to protect himself and those he cares about from their negative consequences. He develops what might be called benevolent cunning, the ability to navigate complex social and professional situations while maintaining his integrity and treating others with respect. This evolved approach to human psychology and social dynamics requires a deep understanding of what motivates people and how they are likely to behave in various circumstances. The man who has developed this understanding can anticipate problems before they arise, position himself advantageously without harming others, and influence situations in positive directions through subtle and ethical means. This is not manipulation, but rather sophisticated social intelligence applied constructively. The psychological principle underlying this approach is that people are primarily motivated by their own interests, fears, and desires. Rather than being cynical about this reality, the man with evolved Machiavellian intelligence simply accepts it as a fact of human nature and works with it, rather than against it. He understands that trying to change people's fundamental nature is futile, but that understanding and working with their nature can lead to mutually beneficial outcomes. In romantic relationships, this translates to a deep understanding of feminine psychology and what genuinely attracts and maintains women's interest. Rather than trying to be someone he is not or using manipulative tactics to create false attraction, he develops himself into the kind of man who naturally possesses the qualities that healthy women find appealing. He understands that genuine attraction cannot be forced or faked, but must be earned through authentic development and consistent demonstration of attractive qualities. The evolved Machiavellian mind recognizes that the most powerful form of influence is not coercive but inspirational. Rather than trying to control others through fear or manipulation, he seeks to inspire them through his example and to create situations where their interests align with his. This approach is far more sustainable and effective than traditional manipulation because it creates willing cooperation rather than reluctant compliance. This principle applies equally in professional settings where the man with evolved Machiavellian intelligence focuses on creating value for others while positioning himself to benefit from that value creation. He understands that the most secure form of power comes not from making others dependent on him, but from making himself valuable to others. This subtle but crucial distinction separates the mature masculine approach from the immature masculine need to dominate and control. The development of this sophisticated understanding requires extensive observation of human behavior and careful analysis of social dynamics. The man who wishes to develop these capabilities must become a student of psychology, studying not just what people say, but what motivates their actions. He must learn to read between the lines of social interactions and to understand the unspoken currents that drive group behavior. This level of social intelligence allows him to navigate complex situations with grace and effectiveness. He can sense when someone is being dishonest or has hidden agendas. He can predict how different people will react to various approaches. He can position conversations and negotiations to achieve favorable outcomes for all parties involved. These skills make him valuable in both personal and professional contexts. The key insight that separates the dark masculine interpretation of Machiavellian principles from crude manipulation is the understanding that sustainable success requires creating win-win situations rather than zero-sum competitions. The man who has truly mastered these principles knows that his long-term interests are best served by treating others fairly and helping them achieve their goals. This enlightened self-interest creates a reputation for reliability and fairness that opens doors and creates opportunities. In the context of personal relationships, this evolved approach means understanding and appreciating the genuine needs and desires of his romantic partner while being honest about his own needs and boundaries. Rather than playing games or using psychological tactics to maintain attraction, he focuses on continuous self-improvement and on creating a relationship dynamic that serves both partners' growth and happiness. The Machiavellian concept of maintaining one's reputation becomes, in the dark masculine interpretation, a focus on maintaining one's integrity and consistency. The man who embodies these principles understands that his reputation is his most valuable asset and that it must be earned through consistent actions rather than clever words. He knows that trust once lost is difficult to regain, and therefore he takes care to honor his commitments and to be honest in his dealings with others. This approach to reputation management extends beyond simply avoiding negative behaviors to actively cultivating positive qualities and demonstrating them consistently over time. He understands that people judge him based on patterns of behavior rather than isolated incidents, and therefore he focuses on developing habits and character traits that will serve him well over the long term. The strategic thinking that is central to Machiavellian thought becomes, in the mature masculine context, a form of life planning and goal achievement. Rather than focusing solely on short-term gains, he thinks in terms of long-term consequences and builds strategies that will serve his interests over decades rather than months. This long-term perspective influences his choices about career development, relationship building, health maintenance, and personal growth. This strategic approach to life requires the ability to delay gratification and to make short-term sacrifices for long-term benefits. The man who has developed this capacity can resist immediate temptations that would undermine his long-term goals and can maintain focus and discipline even when progress seems slow or uncertain. This ability to think and act strategically over extended periods is one of the qualities that others find most attractive and impressive about the dark masculine archetype. The Machiavellian understanding of power dynamics, when evolved and refined, becomes an appreciation for the subtle forms of influence and leadership that create lasting change. Rather than seeking to dominate others through force or manipulation, the mature masculine seeks to influence through example, inspiration, and the creation of value. This approach to power is more attractive to others because it enhances rather than diminishes their autonomy and dignity. Part 3. The Indestructible Self. The ultimate expression of the dark masculine archetype is the development of what might be called the indestructible self. Not indestructible in the sense of being immune to physical harm or emotional pain, but indestructible in the sense of possessing a core identity and set of values that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. This is the man who has found within himself a source of strength and stability that no one else can take away. The process of developing this indestructible self begins with the recognition that most of what men consider to be their identity is actually built on shifting foundations. Career success, social status, physical appearance, and even relationships, while important, are all subject to change and loss. The man who builds his identity primarily on these external factors remains vulnerable to circumstances beyond his control. The dark masculine archetype, in contrast, builds his identity on internal factors that he can control and develop regardless of external circumstances. This internal foundation consists of several key elements: a clear understanding of his values and principles, a commitment to continuous growth and learning, the ability to find meaning and purpose in any situation, and the capacity to maintain his emotional equilibrium regardless of what happens around him. These elements combine to create a psychological resilience that others find deeply attractive, because it signals the kind of stability and reliability that makes for a valuable partner, friend, or colleague. The development of clear values and principles requires deep self-reflection and often painful honesty about what truly matters. Many men drift through life adopting the values of their families, communities, or peer groups without ever examining whether these values actually align with their authentic selves. The process of developing the indestructible self requires questioning these inherited values and consciously choosing principles that resonate with one's deepest convictions. Once these values are clearly defined, they become a compass for decision-making and behavior. The man who knows what he stands for can navigate complex situations with confidence because he has clear criteria for evaluating his options. This consistency and predictability in behavior creates trust and respect from others who know they can count on him to act according to his principles even when doing so is difficult or costly. The commitment to continuous growth and learning ensures that setbacks and failures become opportunities for development rather than sources of permanent damage. The man who has cultivated this mindset approaches challenges as chances to test and improve his capabilities. He views criticism as valuable feedback rather than personal attacks. He sees obstacles as puzzles to be solved rather than insurmountable barriers. This growth-oriented perspective makes him resilient in the face of adversity and attractive to others who are drawn to people with a positive and proactive approach to life's challenges. The ability to find meaning and purpose in any situation is perhaps the most powerful component of the indestructible self. This is not naive optimism or denial of reality's darker aspects, but rather the mature understanding that meaning is created rather than discovered. The man who has developed this capability can find purpose in suffering, growth opportunities in failure, and lessons in every experience, regardless of how unpleasant or unwanted it might be. This meaning-making ability is rooted in what psychologists call an internal locus of control, the belief that one's actions and attitudes are the primary determinants of one's life outcomes. While external circumstances certainly matter, the man with an internal locus of control focuses primarily on what he can control: his responses to situations, his effort and attitude, his choices about how to interpret events, and his decisions about what actions to take. The capacity to maintain emotional equilibrium is not about suppressing emotions or pretending to be unaffected by difficult situations. Rather, it is about developing the ability to experience emotions fully without being controlled by them. The man who has developed this capacity can feel anger without acting destructively, experience fear without being paralyzed, and endure sadness without falling into despair. This emotional maturity is deeply attractive to others because it signals the kind of stability that creates safety in relationships. This emotional regulation is developed through practice and often through deliberately putting oneself in challenging situations that test one's composure. Like physical strength, emotional strength is developed through progressive resistance training. The man who consistently challenges himself to remain calm and centered in difficult situations gradually builds the psychological muscles that allow him to maintain his equilibrium even under extreme pressure. The integration of these elements creates what might be called anti-fragility, the quality of actually becoming stronger when exposed to stress, challenges, and adversity. Unlike resilience, which is the ability to bounce back from difficulties, anti-fragility is the ability to use difficulties as fuel for growth and improvement. The man who has developed this quality actually benefits from obstacles and setbacks because they provide opportunities to test and strengthen his capabilities. This anti-fragile quality is perhaps the most attractive aspect of the dark masculine archetype because it signals not just the ability to survive difficulties, but the ability to transform them into advantages. Women, who are often more risk-averse than men and more concerned with security and stability, find this quality particularly appealing because it suggests that a man will not only persevere through challenges, but will emerge from them stronger and more capable. The development of the indestructible self also requires what might be called strategic vulnerability, the ability to be open and authentic while maintaining appropriate boundaries and self-protection. This is not the indiscriminate emotional dumping that characterizes immature masculinity. nor is it the emotional stonewalling that characterizes toxic masculinity. Instead, it is the conscious choice to share one's inner world with carefully selected people in appropriate contexts, while maintaining the strength and stability that others depend on. This strategic vulnerability requires high emotional intelligence and the ability to read situations and people accurately. The man who has developed this capability knows when and with whom to share his struggles, fears, and uncertainties. He understands that vulnerability, when shared appropriately, actually increases rather than decreases respect and attraction because it demonstrates confidence and security. Only a man who is truly strong can afford to show his weaknesses selectively. The practical application of these principles in daily life requires consistent discipline and self-awareness. The man developing his indestructible self must constantly monitor his thoughts, emotions, and reactions to ensure they align with his values and goals. He must be willing to make difficult choices that serve his long-term development, even when they require short-term sacrifice or discomfort. This might mean ending relationships that drain his energy or compromise his values, leaving jobs that do not align with his purpose or potential, or changing habits and lifestyle patterns that undermine his health or effectiveness. These choices are often difficult and sometimes lonely, but they are necessary for the development of authentic strength and the creation of a life that truly reflects his values and aspirations. The rewards of this development process extend far beyond personal satisfaction or romantic success. The man who has built an indestructible self becomes a source of strength and stability for others. He becomes the person that friends call during crises, that family members turn to for advice, and that colleagues rely on during difficult projects. This reliability and consistency create a positive reputation that opens doors and creates opportunities throughout his life. In romantic relationships, the man with an indestructible self offers something rare and valuable, a partner who will not be shaken by life's inevitable challenges, and who will actually grow stronger through adversity. This quality provides a deep sense of security that allows his partner to be more vulnerable and open because she knows he can handle whatever she shares with him. The relationship becomes a sanctuary where both partners can be authentic because they know their bond is built on solid foundations. The ultimate paradox of the indestructible self is that it is built not through avoiding destruction, but through voluntarily destroying the weak aspects of oneself before external circumstances force that destruction. The man who consciously eliminates his dependencies, illusions, and character flaws makes himself invulnerable to others who might try to exploit these weaknesses. He becomes anti-fragile because he has already subjected himself to the stress that might have broken him and has emerged stronger. This voluntary self-destruction and reconstruction is perhaps the most challenging aspect of developing the dark masculine archetype, but it is also the most rewarding. It requires the courage to look honestly at one's flaws and limitations, the discipline to work consistently on improvement, and the wisdom to know which battles are worth fighting. The man who undertakes this journey with commitment and persistence will find that he has built something within himself that no external force can take away, a sense of identity, purpose, and capability that remains constant regardless of what happens in the world around him. The development of the dark masculine archetype and the indestructible self is not a destination but a continuous journey of growth and refinement. The man who embodies these qualities never considers himself finished or perfect, but maintains a commitment to ongoing improvement and development. This growth-oriented mindset ensures that he continues to become more attractive, capable, and valuable throughout his life, rather than peaking in youth and declining with age. This approach to masculine development offers a path forward for men who are seeking something deeper and more meaningful than superficial success or temporary pleasures. It provides a framework for building genuine strength and attractiveness that does not depend on manipulation, dominance, or the diminishment of others. Instead, it focuses on the development of authentic capabilities and character traits that benefit not only the individual, but also everyone who interacts with him. The world needs more men who embody these principles because they provide leadership, stability, and inspiration for others who are still struggling to find their way. They become models of what is possible when a man commits to his own development and takes responsibility for creating the kind of life and character he wants to have. In a time when traditional masculine roles and identities are being questioned and redefined, the dark masculine archetype offers a vision of masculinity that is both powerful and positive, both strong and nurturing, both independent and connected. The journey to develop these qualities is not easy, and it is not for everyone. It requires a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about oneself and to persist through difficulties that might cause others to give up. However, For the man who is willing to undertake this journey with sincerity and commitment, the rewards are extraordinary. A life of genuine satisfaction and meaning, relationships of depth and authenticity, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that whatever challenges life might present, he has the internal resources to handle them with grace and effectiveness. This is the ultimate expression of the dark masculine, not the man who destroys others to build himself up, but the man who destroys his own weakness to become truly indestructible. In doing so, he becomes not just attractive to others, but genuinely valuable to them, offering strength when they are weak, clarity when they are confused, and stability when their world feels chaotic. This is the kind of masculinity that the world needs more of, and it is available to any man who is willing to do the work required to develop it.